Hello and welcome to the Raw review here on Wrestling with Regret. Now before I begin the review, I have to say that my thoughts are with the family and friends of Shad Gaspard, one half of Crime Time from WWE. It was reported on Sunday that he and his 10-year-old son were out swimming off the coast of Venice Beach when they were hit by a riptide, and so he was able to get his 10-year-old son rescued, but Shad, according to officials, did submerge and has since gone missing. They've not been able to find his body as of this time. Things sound pretty grim and sound pretty tragic right now. There's been no official statement. There's been no updates as of this morning. And so right now they're not making any statements at this point, but at the time of what I'm talking right now, so a lot can change between tonight and tomorrow morning. But for right now, my thoughts, like I said, are with Shad's family at this time. So as hard as it is to make that transition from that really sad, tragic news to this, frivolous thing we call wrestling, I guess that's what we're here to do. So let's begin. The show opens up with an interview in the ring with Randy Orton, and Charlie Caruso's introducing the thing, and what you heard last week at the end when she said this could be the greatest wrestling match ever, apparently that was not some off-the-cuff flub, that was not some minor stroke she suffered at the ring. That's actually how they're trying to build and promote this match. It could possibly be the greatest wrestling match of all time. Just no. Orton in the ring reminds us that wrestling is the basis of what they do in the company, that the WWE stands for World Wrestling Entertainment. It's kind of refreshing to hear the dreaded W word come up so much in programming right now with this particular feud. He says that Orton says he saw doubt and fear in Edge's eyes when he made that challenge last week. Out comes Edge to make his own little proclamation. He says, Orton never cared about being a wrestler like Edge did. To Orton, wrestling was always the backup plan. He never had the passion that Edge and so many others had. They bring up the history they had when Edge beat Orton for an Intercontinental Championship in 2004. And so Orton finally asks Edge point blank if he accepts, and Edge angrily accepts. Spikes the microphone and bounces up and hits Orton in the chest too. I was hoping to kind of hit him in the face, and I had to try and play that off. But anyway, I enjoyed this opening promo. I think both guys gave some very good points. Really paints Edge in this super relatable light for the fans who say, when they critique certain wrestlers for their lack of passion, guys like Randy Orton and guys like Brock Lesnar, it didn't go overboard and get into being too shooty-shoot with the comments. I think they kind of that's something the fans can fill the blanks in for, but I think it did slightly reinforce some of those old Orton stereotypes that we've come to know for so long. I think that does help. I've said before that sometimes reality can help bolster a good feud and make it better. I think this is kind of one of those times when it really does help. Seth Rollins has had a revelation. He's cutting a promo in the ring with Murphy at his side. He says that when he lost to Drew McIntyre at Money in the Bank, it put him in a dark place, but he finally saw the light thanks to Rey Mysterio. And he says what he did to Rey Mysterio, or what happened to Rey Mysterio, according to his words, were unfortunate but necessary, and that one day Rey will see it was a blessing in disguise, and he tells Rey, "You're welcome." What a complete delusional promo by Seth here. It's just the more he buys into it, the more that I as a viewer buy into it as well. Humberto Carrillo interrupts and basically comes out to defend Rey's honor. Seth volunteers Murphy to fight for him, and so we have this brief match here. Murphy doing double duty here because he's working Aleister Black later in the night as well. It's a fairly short match. Carrillo gets a couple of big moves in, but then Seth kind of just mildly distracts Carrillo, and it ends with Murphy hitting his law onto Carrillo to win. There's more of a beatdown after the match. Aleister Black appears, chases Seth and Murphy off, and so we'll see these guys return in the ring for their match later on. Remember all that time they spent putting Carrillo on TV and trying to push him, and then nothing ever came of it? Backstage, King Corbin's having a royal fit. He's yelling some rhetorical questions to stagehands and referees. He feels he's not getting the treatment that he deserves as a king over on Raw. Then we see a quick promo by Liv Morgan talking about how her mom was an inspiration to her and constantly holding back tears, or at least sounding like it in this promo. She says she's determined like her mother and that one day she'll become the women's champion. I still don't care for this character when you consider that one of the most powerful over characters, female characters in WWE for the last couple of years has been this outspoken, brash woman in Becky Lynch. What makes you think that fans are going to flock to this girl who's still finding herself and she's on the verge of tears cutting promos? I just don't see it. I hope that in a few months I'm proven wrong by this, but I just don't see it right now. Charlotte Flair makes her way to the ring. Oh, goody. She cuts a promo about how great she is, talks about her match coming up this Friday, the champion versus champion match with Bayley, and then she calls out Ruby Riott because she's got something to say. Ruby does come out, but it turns out she says nothing, and we have a match between the two of them. It's actually okay. It's a short one. Ruby looks pretty good here in a couple of spurts. She's doing some joint manipulation on Charlotte, kind of working her hand over, but Charlotte, like Thanos, is inevitable, and she puts out Ruby with the figure 8. So Ruby's losing streak continues. Backstage, Bobby Lashley is about to be interviewed when MVP shows up and interrupts. He tries to motivate Lashley some more, similar to what he did last week on Raw, where he says, why don't you put that full Nelson on a champion? Well, we'll never know because you haven't fought for a championship in 13 years. And he says, when will Bobby Lashley free Bobby Lashley? Wants him to think about it. And then we go to Asuka's championship celebration. Kairi Sane introduces Asuka. There's balloons everywhere. They talk about her previous accomplishments, all the other championships she has won. She's the Grand Slam champion right now. And then as you've got Kairi starting to play Asuka's theme on a recorder, Nia Jax appears. And Nia basically, this great line here by Nia here, where she says that Asuka lucked her way into the greatest temp job ever when Becky handed her the championship. Nia says there's only one way this confrontation is going to go down. And considering how absolutely one-sided this feud has been over the years across NXT and main roster, yeah, she's got a point. And so then Asuka beats her up and then chases Nia off. That's not the last time we see these ladies in the show tonight. We see King Corbin once again being interviewed backstage this time, and he says that he has no doubts about his match with Drew tonight. He says even though Drew beat Lesnar at WrestleMania for the championship, he's still capable of making mistakes. Corbin says he will win tonight, and then the next time these two face off in the ring will be in the main event of next year's WrestleMania. Well, if the shows are still in empty venues, that's still a possibility. R-Truth taking on Bobby Lashley once again. Truth saying before the match he does not want Lashley to put Nelson from The Simpsons on him. Then as the match starts, Truth puts the Pretty Ricky teeth back in, but the teeth provide no buffs, no protections, and Lashley destroys him with a full Nelson slam and a proper full Nelson afterward there. And so then MVP's on stage giving a round of applause to Lashley. Lana just screaming at the TV, just screaming the night away. As far as the Pretty Ricky thing, again, it's just, I'm sure somebody in the back thinks it's hilarious, but I just don't get it. Women's Tag Team Championships up next as Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross defend against the Iconics, who made their big surprise return last week and beat the champions in non-title action, which gives us this rematch here. It's a pretty short contest. Alexa hits the Twisted Bliss onto Billie Kay, but then Peyton Royce comes in and just takes her liberties with Alexa, keeps throwing her shoulder first into the ring post. The referee calls it a disqualification, so the champions retain that way. Then backstage after the match, Billie loses her temper, slaps Peyton in the face, and immediately regrets it, and they're both crying and they're hugging. And that's where we leave off with that segment. So are there already cracks forming in the Iconics, in their structure right now? I'm wondering, I was disappointed when I saw that outcome. Is it the last time we'll see them fight for the championships? Who knows? But I'm really wondering how this is going to keep building on as we go. Elsewhere backstage, Kairi Sane playing some more recorder tunes when Nia Jax attacks her. We saw her a couple of segments earlier where you see her kind of lurking in the shadows and looking to be pursuing Kairi here. And so this is the culmination of that. And then later on, we see Asuka checking on Kairi and getting very mad. She confronts Nia Jax. Nia kind of blows Asuka off, who then just grabs her by the ponytails and just yanks her down. And she yells at her a bit and she runs off, and that's where it ends. I was surprised we didn't see any more physicality from Asuka there, and more fighting, kicks and stuff like that. It was just kind of left at that, and so we'll obviously see a match between Nia and Asuka coming up, is what it seems to be building toward. So yeah, I was surprised that it was not as violent on Asuka's end as it was, say, on Nia Jax's when she jumped Kairi. So we'll see what the tit for tat will be next week. In a submission match, Natalya taking on Shayna Baszler, a follow-up to last week when Natalya asked the immortal question, do you know how bad it makes you look when you disrespect the miracle that is motherhood? This match had some good grabs and counters early on. Natalya actually gets the sharpshooter locked in on Shayna, but she's able to escape by literally crawling out of the ring. A leg hook is applied, but Shayna's able to roll out of it and get right into the Kirifuda clutch. Natalya taps out. Shayna wins yet again, and we see more of that anger and frustration and resentment from Natalya here. Man, a cold move by the stage crew here. They're just setting up the Kevin Owens show while Natalya's still in the ring. They don't even let her leave yet, and she snaps and throws all the signs out and everything. I'm wondering where this whole tantrum thing with Natalya is going. Like I said last week, when you do a tantrum one week, you're bound to do it for the next several weeks. So where's it going to go? What's the turning point? As long as it's not the farting gimmick again, I really don't care where it's going to end. It's time for the return of Kevin Owens and the KO show. We have not seen Kevin since he beat Seth Rollins at WrestleMania almost 2 months ago. He says in the opening part of this promo here that he got banged up in that match, which is why he hasn't been on TV for a while, but he's good to go now. And so his guests are Zelina Vega and her crew, who just before the segment began, we saw them still arguing in the back. She denies the group is falling apart and she puts all her guys over. Then Kevin brings out his next guest. It's Apollo Crews. Back from the injury that kept him out of Money in the Bank, he charges the ring and takes down Andrade, and Kevin joins in the fracas, and we have an impromptu tag team match as KO and Apollo take on Garza and Andrade. The big story with this match here, as short as it was, is that Theory on the outside tries to do a cheap shot when Zelina has the referee distracted, but we get a miscue and he hits Garza instead. Apollo hits the powerbomb to win, to get some of his heat back from when he was taken off TV. And so then afterward, the fallout finally happens and the group implodes. Andrade and Garza beat the hell out of Austin Theory and they just leave him laying in the timekeeper's area. I'm still not entirely sure why they were arguing in the first place, but Austin Theory is out of the group and Zelina slaps him for good measure too, so he is out, but we're not done seeing Theory on this night. Drew McIntyre's interview now, he talks about what King Corbin said earlier. He says Corbin is a terrible human being, but he's also able to do terrible things in the ring. But he says Corbin made a mistake coming over from SmackDown. He's got a Claymore fit for a king. And then we go to our next match here. Aleister Black taking on Murphy. Austin Theory, who is still selling that beatdown from earlier, he's still lingering in the timekeeper's area, and Seth Rollins stands over him and just looks down on him. If you remember how Murphy joined the group several months ago, you have a pretty good idea of where this is going. He offers his hand, and Theory stands up, and then he goes in the ring and attacks Aleister Black. And so they all take Black out and everything, and so Theory and Rollins hug, they beat up Black some more, and they leave the ring. I think this could be an interesting move for Theory here. I thought that, him being part of Zelina's crew didn't really make sense on a couple of levels, and so, he was literally thrown into the group as a replacement like a week before WrestleMania, so I think it was never intended for him to actually be part of that group on a full-time basis. Before this twist happened where he joins Seth Rollins and becomes a MessiahManiac, my thought was, are they going to turn him babyface? Like, that would be a really bad idea, because so far we had seen nothing from him in this run since he's been on NXT even that would suggest he'd be a good babyface. Because not only has he been a heel his entire run, there's no live crowd to act as a barometer to see if that makes sense. So I'm glad they went with this instead. Like, I would have, maybe keep him a loner for a while, but I guess that's not the cards apparently. So now he is the latest disciple of Seth Rollins. I guess, they need more bodies in the wake of, Akam and Rezar being off of television. And so, yeah, let's bring Austin Theory in. He seems to be kind of a utility player. Like, oh, let's put him in with Andrade and Angel Garza. Oh, let's put him in with Seth Rollins and Murphy. So he's proven his worth here so far, I think. So we'll see where this new alignment goes. So last week we saw the Street Profits and the Viking Raiders take part in a little basketball game. And so now, this week, the Viking Raiders are in their own home turf. They've challenged the Profits to an axe throwing contest. We saw all these little skits as they were preparing for it earlier in the day throughout the show at some LARPing event with these other Vikings and everything. So the whole story is, it's kind of the inverse of what happened with basketball, where the Viking Raiders are just killing it. They're just nailing every bullseye with their axes, and Montez and Angelo are just missing every shot. Finally, again, kind of like mirroring what we saw in basketball, Montez finally hits a bullseye in his last axe. Everyone's happy for him, including the Viking Raiders. And then the police show up. And no, they're not going there because they're violating all these social media regulations with them being so close together here in this park or ranch or wherever they are in Florida. It's because one of the axes got flung into their windshield. How far did that axe have to go over the trees and outside the property in order to land in a cop car's windshield? What are the odds? Then I was really confused because the cop goes, who threw this? Only one way to find out. Let's see who could throw these axes. I was really confused. So wait, now the cops are getting into the spirit of things? Angelo Dawkins hits the shot from behind his back over his shoulder. He trash talks a horse that's elsewhere in the shot. And then the final segment, the closing, the postscript in this, is the cops are looking very stern. And the lady cop goes, I'm going to let you off with a warning because Ivar's cute. And okay, that whole thing, the whole segment kind of ended on a weird note for me. Like, the cops kind of being there was funny, but like, then the whole thing I think kind of fell off the rails. I'm not saying it was bad, because there were a few moments in the thing that I was entertained by, but I'm not saying it's not nearly on the level of what I enjoyed from the basketball game last week. We see Apollo Crews once again, and he's being interviewed. He says he doesn't know what hurt more, the injury itself or him being taken off the Money in the Bank ladder match. He says it's been the hardest 3 weeks of his life, but next week he's going to challenge Andrade once again for the U.S. Championship. You remember it was that match a few weeks ago where he got injured and taken off TV. So Zelina shows up and warns him that Crews may never walk again if he goes through with this match, but Crews remains confident and says that he will win. And you know, I really enjoyed what they were doing with Apollo, that one episode where he had that big arc where he was really killing it and then he got hurt. So I would love to see really another great match between these two happening next week, maybe with a title change. Time will tell. In your main event, it's the first match in the brand-to-brand invitational as King Corbin from SmackDown, fresh off another surprise roll-up loss to Elias, takes on the unstoppable champion Drew McIntyre. I mean, it could really go either way. Before the match begins, though, we see the return of Bobby Lashley and MVP, and Lashley says he's coming for Drew and his championship. The match begins, and it is honestly the best match on the night so far. It's a shame it took all 3 hours to get there. It is the most competitive, and Drew, you know, is pushing, or I should say Corbin is pushing Drew to the limit here. He hits a deep 6 onto Drew. We get a very long 2.5 count there. It's probably the most at risk Drew has been in quite a long time. Ultimately, Drew hits the Claymore to win the match. Was there ever any doubt? He stares down Lashley and he yells at him. He wants to fight Lashley. Be the killer you are, Lashley, and we're going to face off for this championship as we fade to black. I mean, another good showing for Drew here. Corbin, I guess they'll have him lose as many times as they want him to. He's bringing the heat. He's bringing the vitriol. So I guess in that sense, he's doing his job. And I guess people are I would imagine people are happy to see him lose. So there you go. My grade for this week's Raw is a D+. What a turnaround in all the worst ways from last week, which was, by all intents and purposes, a pretty strong show in my opinion. There was one standout moment in the beginning with Edge and Orton, and quite honestly, by the end of the night, it felt like that was a totally different show. I felt like I was watching like a different program from that opening salvo with Edge and Orton to where we got to by the end. I thought there were a couple interesting storylines forming here, like with Austin Theory joining with Seth Rollins, and then seeing Lashley and MVP officially forming this coalition. I liked that. But man, besides those few bright moments, a very tired feeling episode of Raw. That was the biggest thing I got from this one. Just like more kind of the status quo, things just kind of like moving along, not too different from what we saw last week, and done like worse somehow. That was the vibe I got from this week's Raw. They can't all be great. They usually aren't, but I mean, there's some diamonds in the rough out there. This one to me was a big low point. But let me know what you thought about Raw this week in the comments section below, and while you still can, leave a vote with a letter grade in the iCard in the corner of your screen. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.